Hello and welcome. If you're familiar with my channel, from time to time you may have seen me do reviews on sabers or saber products from a company called Kyberlight sabers. Now with most of my videos, after I post them online, they generate comments and feedback from viewers on YouTube. Sometimes those are comments about the video, and sometimes they're users sharing their experiences with the sabers that I have reviewed. Now, a few of the comments that I've gotten recently, specifically on Kyberlight sabers, have prompted me to want to shoot this video, which is basically a Kyberlight sabers owner's manual. That's going to talk about what you can expect, how you need to deal with Kyberlight sabers, and what sorts of things you should do before you take them out into the field. Now, relevant to that, one of my recent comments from a viewer on YouTube about Kyberlight sabers was somebody who just ordered a couple of sabers, was pretty excited to get him in, took him out to the lake, swung him around for a half hour, hit him against a few trees, brought him back, and then after the fact he was pretty disappointed because what he ended up with was he was missing a blade tip, he was missing a CoverTech wheel, some of the screws were backing out, and so I figured this video might be something useful for you guys. So let me cover first off what you get with what you're dealing with Kyberlight sabers, and then we'll talk about how to maximize your experience with them. Now, Kyberlight sabers design, as I've done in the reviews before, is basically a basic tube hilt with the electronics in it, screw-on pommel, just like pretty much everybody else in the industry, sleeves or shrouds that go on over top of the saber, and an emitter that also goes over the top of the saber, and Kyberlight saber blades. All right, now the Kyberlight saber blades, as I've talked about before, are undiffused. This is their crackle blade, which is one of their new ones, but they do not come with diffusion film in it. I have added diffusion film to this one. And they've got really deep set screw-on tips. All right, so let me talk about what they're good for right out of the box. Okay, now a Kyberlight saber is something that you should consider to be, it's not going to be on par with something like a Vader's Vault, which is a higher end saber. Kyberlight sabers is not nearly as expensive as one of those. It's also not something that you can consider as on par with something like an Ultra Saber. So Ultra Sabers are inexpensive, they're durable, they're no frills, and they're built to beat the hell out of things with. They're a working saber. Now, Kyberlight is somewhere in between. They're a feature saber, so they're not a full-on dueling saber without a little bit of adjustment, nor are they a high-end collector's saber. They're a low-end entry-level saber that's really great. It fills a great niche in the industry, somewhere between the low-end click a button and it lights on glorified flashlight, and the high-end dials and readouts, talks to you sort of saber. Right, the Kyberlight is right there in the middle. So if you're looking for a saber as a collection piece or a collector's piece to sit on a shelf or to wear around as part of a costume, Kyberlight is a great saber for that if you like the aesthetic of some of the saber pieces that they offer. If you want something with a crossguard or something like that, Kyberlight's a good way to go. Now, if you're going to be using Kyberlight as a working saber, there's a few things that you should know. It has some design issues that need to be addressed on your end. Now, in this market, in the saber market, sometimes you need to get familiar with the fact that much like if you're dealing with 3D printers or if you're dealing with auto mechanics, there's a market where you get a product and it's designed to work, and if it doesn't, you get mad at the product distributor and irate, and you vent this righteous indignation appropriately. And then there's a market that's a hobby market, where you get something that people have had success with and you tinker with it until you have the success that other people have had with it. And that's the appropriate way I find to deal with a lot of things in the saber industry. I haven't found one out of the box yet that was the perfect saber. Most of the time you need to modify them, add grips, change things up, drill holes, change electronics, mess with the blade, aftermarket blades from places like Ripper Blades, that sort of thing. So the Kyberlight saber, if you're going to take it out and use it, a few things that you should know. First off, you need to not use it without the shroud. Okay, Kyberlight has a sort of sharp ridge between the two buttons, so you're going to need to use this shroud. Now, the screws that they send you with the shroud, some of the comments that I've gotten, they send you these little short screws, and then they send you the longer ones. If you're just putting the shroud on and you use a longer screw, you're going to screw that screw straight down into your battery or into your circuit board, and you're going to kill your saber. Okay, without using the CoverTech wheel, just putting the shroud on, you want to use the smaller screws. All right, let me go ahead and put one of those in to hold this down. Okay. Now, if you are using a CoverTech wheel, then that's what the longer screws are for. These CoverTech wheels and some of the emitters. All right, so I've got one screw in there securing that right now. I'll go ahead and put a pommel on it. And this would be a bare bones saber even without the emitter. Now, if I were to take this out into the field and use it, there's a rattle. Okay. Now, I've talked about this rattle in another video. Basically, in order for this sleeve to slide down nice over the saber hilt and not scratch up the aluminum, there has to be a little bit of space. In a past video, I talked about wrapping a little bit of electrical tape underneath here. There's actually a better solution I'll show you in just a second. But if I take this out and start using it, yes, the screws are going to back out. The saber itself is going to rattle, which is going to set off flash-on clashes inadvertently when there are not supposed to be any. The blade is not going to light up very well because it's lacking diffusion film, so I'm going to get a flare down here at the base, and I'm going to get not a lot of light up at the top. And after a little bit of use, the screw tip on the blade is going to start to come loose, and eventually it's going to fly off into space. It takes a while though, because there's a lot of threading on this, but eventually it will fly off into space. So to address those issues with a Kyberlight, a few things. Get familiar with O-rings. Now, O-rings are little rubber rings that you can pick up at any hardware store, and people have gotten rather manic over what size to use. Now, these O-rings right here, this is an 1/8 of an inch thickness O-ring. Okay, this is a 1/16 of an inch. I'll talk about these in a second. For the most part, these 1/8 inch thick ones, and it doesn't really matter what diameter or what size O-ring you use. You see, I got two very different ones here. Both of these will work. The key is it has to be smaller than the saber so that you have to stretch it a little bit to get it over the saber and then roll it down into place. Now, in order to stop that rattle, what you need is you need 2 to 3 O-rings above the shroud. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put on 3. I'll put on two of the big ones, and I'll put this smaller one on. I've got to stretch it a little bit more to get this small one over. But once it's on, it still goes right down. Now you get those on there, and you cinch them down on top of the shroud or sleeve, and that secures the top. Now we've also got a spot down here at the bottom, a little gap. If I'm not using a CoverTech wheel, I can use another one of those 1/8 inch O-rings right there. If I am using a CoverTech wheel, I want 2 little 1/16 inch or 2/16 of an inch O-rings right down in there. Okay, the reason for that is the CoverTech wheel, let me get those two next to each other here. There we go. Okay, the CoverTech wheel, when it goes on, it rides over that ridge or that gap between the sleeve and the bottom of the saber. Alright, so with that, we have a much more solid saber that's going to last a lot longer and put up with a lot more abuse. There are 2 more issues that need to be addressed, and that's the screws backing out, which they will, and the saber, actually 3. The screws backing out, the saber tip, and the diffusion film. Now the diffusion film I'm going to leave alone because I've actually done a video on how to add this film. This is just cellophane from a craft store. The tip, fairly easy. All you need to do, if this tip coming out is going to be an issue, if you're just using it for short periods of time, you can just screw it back in when you feel it starting to rattle. But if it's going to be an issue, you unthread it a little bit, put a couple of drops of super glue on the threads, thread it back in. You can use epoxy if you'd rather. Thread it back in as tight as you can, let the glue set, tip's not going to come out anymore. Okay. As to the screws, you have 2 options. You can tighten the crap out of them, which is one way to do it. It's a little bit iffier, and you will strip a few wrenches. The wrench will strip before the screws will. But the other way to do it is if the screws are in danger of backing out, you take a little bit of plumber's tape. Now that's that white stretchy Teflon tape you can pick up at Walmart. You put a little, or you wrap a little bit of that around the screw thread. So you take the screw out, take a little shred of plumber's tape, wrap it around the threads, screw the thing in. You will be able to unscrew the screws when you want to, but they will not back out with the concussion of use. So if you do all of those things, add the film, secure the blade tip, add some O-rings, use a little bit of Teflon tape, then the Kyberlight is a reasonably well-equipped dueling saber. If you don't do those things, it will rattle itself apart with prolonged use or prolonged or vigorous use. So hopefully this has been of use. I still rather like my Kyberlight, and I'm not saying that it's a bad saber. I'm just saying you have to think about it a little bit differently. You have to think about it as a hobby saber, a saber that you will have to put a little bit of work into before you take it out and put it through the paces. Hopefully this has been of use to you. If it has, please join me back for more videos and more reviews.